So I don't know, take that for what it may be.
Yeah. Miles, I have another question. I mean, to have such an army, because I remember in our first talk, you also mentioned how intelligent they were or how experienced they were in fighting the US forces, right, in Helmand where you were. And I always ask myself, even, let's make it very simple. To shoot a pistol or even to punch or even to use a knife, you need to learn how to use it. You just cannot go and do it. Where do they learn all these techniques and tactics, and then to coordination and to fighting together as a group? I mean, where do they learn these things, Miles?
Pakistan. Pakistan has been a safe haven for the Taliban for a long time. There's stuff going on there. There's training camps that exist. That have existed for a while. However, these training camps aren't training your guys, the guys that we were fighting in Helmand. These training camps were not training those guys. That's too big of a logistical operation for a guy to go to that camp, get trained up, and then get sent back. And again, this is not an army with a payroll. This isn't like, okay, Abdullah, you're now going to get off the front line and we're going to send you to Pakistan. You're going to go to the advanced RPG gunners course and you're going to learn how to shoot an RPG better. And then you're going to come back and then you're going to lead an RPG squad against the Americans. It's like, that's not how this works. How they got good, I think, is a lot of trial and error. And another thing, saying that we had like in the military is like, all the dumb ones, all the bad ones that were bad at fighting, they get killed very quickly. But you have a lot of this experience that shows up. And then another thing is that I think in terms of their tactics and techniques and procedures, you have a lot of sharing of information that sort of gets passed along within Taliban groups and networks and communications. So you have a lot of that gets disseminated, and you have a lot of, the Americans are doing something over here. Like, let's tell the guys down in that province down there so they can have this answer. And that goes on in terms of IED making materials and TTPs. So there's that kind of thing. And I think a lot of it is just very good field work and field craft, I should say, field craft and patience and learning and watching. A lot of it is just very, 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 very calculated maneuvers that get pulled off successfully, many of a time. So you have, it was a very smart and agile force, and even today, and then fighting the ANA, things became even easier, right? So the problem with the US is that, we were fighting them and we won that war 20 times over on the battlefield. But when you've got groups that sneak away into Pakistan half the time and you can't touch them and they just have a fresh stream of recruits that keep coming, it's hard dealing with that. You're fighting the same battles for the same cities over and over and over again. And because you have that base of support that just keeps coming out. So there is that. But I don't know. This is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely, you're right. Because I always thinking like in a modern army way of mentality, you're absolutely correct. You train this, you fight that way, you learn this, then you go in that way. Of course, you're a machine gunner. I'm always right, a standing army type of mentality. You're right. That's the way I think. Thanks for yeah.
And then that kind of hurt. I think that really hurt the ANA, because we were training the ANA to be like us, and we were training the police to be like us. And I really think that's a very bad model. What we should have trained the ANA for, it's hard to, it would be impossible to justify at the time, but it's like, we really needed to train the ANA for a way that was really conducive for them to fight in, and, tactics and equipment and uniforms and the whole shebang, the way the units were organized, the way the operating procedures were, everything should have been, this is a better way. But instead we were training them with this very very heavy conventional emphasis of, heavy armor, armored vehicles, armored vests, heavy logistics train, heavy logistics train, heavy air support. And what happened to the ANA is that, they get set up in these positions where now they don't have that heavy logistics train of tons of resupplies of ammunition and food. They don't have it. And then they don't have their support. And then their maintenance and their vehicles are all broken down. And part of it was, like the majority of the ANA was illiterate a lot of the time. So it's like we set them up for failure from the beginning in terms of the strategy that we use to train and equip and get them to fight. Because it's like, well, great, we're giving the ANA, 100 Humvees this month, and it's like, that's awesome. None of the maintenance guys who work on the Humvees have the heavy logistics train of spare parts, to fix it, and neither do they have, the ability to read the manuals that come with the spare parts because they're illiterate. Even if the manuals were all in Dari and Pashto, it wouldn't work, right? So, and the thing is, like, that was working in Iraq because and the Iraqi army, fell apart in the face of ISIS. But the difference in Iraq is that you had a completely different standard to go by, in that Iraqi soldiers could read, they could write, they had the capabilities to do this stuff. They came from a modern society that understood what an army did and what this happened. And if there was corruption and ghost soldiers and stuff, yeah, that happened. But everybody knew the standard. In Afghanistan with the ANA, the standard wasn't there, because now you have people who are villagers, totally illiterate. They join the Miliardu. They still don't know how to write, and it's like, well, how do you fix the Humvee's broken? What do we do? And they're like, I don't know, get another one, kind of thing. So, and it's, I don't know, it's such a tough answer. And I mean, it's like, how we trained the forces in Syria, the SDF, how we trained them and worked sort of within their capacities of, okay, why don't we see what their capabilities are, see what their deficiencies are, what works best for them, and train to that. And what is really going to make the difference here? Because, if we're training them to fight like us, which relies on heavy armor, heavy logistics train, massive air support, short, prolonged fighting, it's like, that's not a model that worked with the ANA. It didn't. And when that got strained, it failed. So it really sucks. It's like we almost set the ANA up for failure by the way we equip them, instead of saying, and this is usually where sort of special forces comes into play, and SF does a much better job at this. And that's why SF worked with the commandos, and the commandos, to this day remain one of the most effective Afghan fighting forces on the government side. And it's because the USSF, trained them to a standard that they could reach and that they were effective at. Whereas with the conventional army, they couldn't. So that was an issue with that. There.
I mean, I was reading, I think it was in CNN yesterday or today. Don't name me on that. It was this morning, right? And it was, I don't know who his name was, but there were some military guys who were saying that, look, I mean, from US, we equipped the National Army, Afghan Army. We gave them so many weapons and so many things that much more than many of our allies, I think I assume they meant smaller countries in Europe, have or had, right? But they still failed. What do you think about these statements, Miles?
Well, it wasn't a failure of a month. It was a failure of 6 years. Over 6 years, the attrition and the casualty rates just kept coming and coming, and they were sustaining casualty rates that couldn't be replaced. Like, that was a failure. So there's that. And then there's this thing with equipping them to a standard that couldn't be maintained. I mean, you give them 10 Humvees, 5 of them break down, and now you only have 5 Humvees left. With the US, it's like you get 10 Humvees, 5 break down, you have 5 ready the next week because you're able to repair them. and that logistics train wasn't there. And then the other problem, the biggest issue in all this was Pakistan. Pakistan continued to, support, train, equip, and coordinate the Taliban. Pakistan is a state supporter of the Taliban. And it's like that, honestly, that was the biggest crux in all this. All the funding and equipment and support, like it all came from there, either as a safeguard or intentionally. And Pakistan was guarding their national security interest in wanting to stop an enemy on their border. And you look at Pakistan right now. Pakistan is jubilant that the Taliban is now in control. Pakistan sees this as a victory over India. I don't know how, because India never maintained any substantive force or, big influence in Afghanistan. I mean, it's very confusing to me, but like the weight of the Pakistani government was behind the Taliban. So it's like, and it doesn't matter what you do in country. And this is why I say, like, we won that war 20 times over. But everything just kept coming out of Pakistan. It's this Vietnam situation where you have Cambodia and Laos and North Vietnam, and it's like what's even the point if it's just going to regrow? And I see a lot of like U.S. vets, and U.S. folks looking at Panjshir, where Ahmad Shah Massoud's son is starting up the resistance, and a lot of people in the U.S. are like, oh, the resistance is still there. The resistance is taking place in Panjshir. And I'm just looking at that, and I'm like, on the one hand, I'm just like, if you were Afghan and you've had 40 years, 50 years of civil war, and you want to finally catch a break, it's like, no, I don't want to restart the civil war. I don't want to restart it under any condition until the Taliban get to the point of being unbearable. In terms of civil society, it's like, until then, it's like just drop it, man. It's over. There'll be no more suicide bombs anymore. There's going to be no more mass civilian casualties from U.S. strikes or from a lot of the suicide bombers that came from Pakistan. None of that's going to happen anymore. So there's that. But then the other aspect of it is like, okay, so what? You restart the resistance. What is that going to do? Take back the country next week. What is that going to do? Pakistan is still going to keep going. And it's like, you're still going to be stuck with the same problem you had before. You had an ineffective and a lot of times corrupt Afghan government that was not functional. And you had a logistics train that wasn't functional, that was leaving ANA guys out to die. And then you have a state sponsor next door that is going to, egg on the Taliban no matter what. So what is that going to solve? Regaining the country back tomorrow? It's not going to solve anything. We're going to deal with the same problem that we had, for the past 20 years. So, I don't know.
Miles, back to Pakistan, which looks at it as a victory over India. Has it something to do with Kashmir tensions between Pakistan and India? I mean, I don't see any relations to Kashmir, but I'm just trying to find a connection.
No, not really with Kashmir, because Kashmir is completely unrelated to Afghanistan in terms of ethnicity. Like there's no Pashtuns in Kashmir, that's for sure. But I mean, Pakistan sees itself. Pakistan is constantly on guard because the thing with Pakistan is that it's like Pakistan is this this made up country with all these different ethnicities that got thrown together. And the Pakistani government is like crapping bricks all the time because you've got Baluchistan in the south wanting to exit from the country. You've got the Pashtuns, which there is a homegrown Pashtun movement to say, why don't we just make our own country and call it Pashtunistan? And now we'll cut the Durand line, we'll carve out half of Afghanistan and carve out half of Pakistan, and then now we'll have our own country, So the Pakistani government doesn't want a Pashtun to happen, Pashtunistan to happen. And then you have, the threat of India, a nuclear superpower to the south. And, that's a big threat. But you've got these three things that can tear apart the country at any given point, right? So, but with the Pakistani government, it's kind of like, taking the Taliban and being like, let's keep the Pashtuns satisfied and let's have them just focus on Afghanistan. we'll hit two birds with one stone. We'll satisfy the Pashtuns by giving what they want in terms of supremacy over Afghanistan, something they've always wanted. And then we'll take that away from India's hands. So now India can't use Afghanistan as a way to hit us from the rear or to ally with us. Because if we have a strong India and a strong Afghanistan, what's going to happen? Well, we're going to have two forces that are going to crush us between it, right? And then you have Baluchistan, which a lot of the Baluchistan Liberation Army, the BLA, uses Afghanistan to run operations into Pakistan, right? And there's a lot of cross-border traffic there. So Pakistan wants that control over Afghanistan to get at the Baluch as well. And the Baluch, the Baluch that are resisting, they want to go against the Pakistani government. They want to have their own country, their own sovereignty, right? So like that's a little problem down there, big problem. And then you have the Pakistani Taliban, which goes against the Pakistani government, right? And then this is where they get bit. Pakistani government gets bit, and the worst display of that was when they invaded a school in Peshawar. And, it was a middle school, and they just, middle or high school, and he killed a lot of people there. And it was like, well, and, Hillary Clinton is famous for saying, Pakistan should be careful of who it supports because they might actually bite them back kind of thing. And that's what she was talking about. So that's the geopolitical strategic goal there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very, very nice that you explained these things. Just one more question. Again, I'm looking at them as an, like standard army. But please forgive me for saying that. When I see, when I was watching, when they moved to cities, right? When they found, let's say Kabul and so, and I was watching Taliban forces, and I realized many of them didn't have even military boots. Miles, how can they walk in those shoes for such a long period of time and fight? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. What the difference is, they're not moving with weight. They're not well, first of all, they're not moving with weight. And then the second thing is that they're very the conflict there is very vehicle they're very vehicle mobile and very vehicle heavy at times. So you move a lot around in vehicles, just like in Syria. You'll drive with vehicles to this spot, and then you might fight and run around a little bit over here, but then you'll get in the vehicle and you'll keep going somewhere else, right? But I think the biggest thing is it's a very lightweight, mobile fighting force that fights very comfortably. They're wearing, Afghan civilian attire, which is, the shalwar or kameez, and then the pakol headgear. This is very comfortable. It's a very comfortable way to fight. And as long as you just got your ammunition, and for what they are doing, it's this very mobile fighting, using very little, not consuming that much ammunition, not massing much force, fighting and then leaving and then resting and then refighting again. You don't really need boots for that. For US forces, it's like, for us, it's like, geez, we have like 60, 70 pounds of gear. We're moving, 10, 20 kilometers a day on these long patrols. And we're moving off the roads because of, we have all this armor because we're very risk averse, and we're moving off the roads because we don't want to go on the roads. So you need boots to work in that environment. You need all this different kinds of gear and stuff, and we're in these heavy vehicles, and we need fire resistant clothing. Taliban don't need fire-resistant clothing. They don't need armor. Their armor is being able to move, to pick up, and displace very quickly.
Yes. Okay, I understand that. It's interesting, and they don't even have. No, of course they don't. Helmets, correct?
No, of course not. No.
Okay, yeah.
But that's the thing, and that just goes into sort of like the way that we trained the Milli Ordu, in that it's like the ANA has helmets and has vests and everything, and it almost makes you wonder. It's like what we probably should have been doing, what probably should have happened was that they should have been like, trained to fight against the Taliban, to be just as mobile, if not more mobile than the Taliban, to be able to run circles around them, to be able to encircle them quicker. And you can't do that with boots or with plate carriers and helmets and, heavily loaded down combat equipment and stuff. You can't do that. So it's kind of like, and it begs the question. It's like, do you really need that? Does the military really need to be? Does the U.S. military really need to make a carbon copy of itself? Because every little part of that has to fall into place, right? Like if you can have a force that everyone has a plate carrier, but if you have a force where everyone has a plate carrier, you need a way to replace everyone's plate carrier when they break or when a new guy comes in to give him a new plate carrier. So, and it's like little tiny logistics things like that. Yeah. The ANA could never do that, So that's just an example in terms of personal gear, right? So it begs the question. It's like, what were we doing? Were we really setting them up for success, even at that basic level of, personal equipment of every individual soldier? Never mind supplying a battalion that has all that equipment. No, I'm just talking about one guy, one squad, one platoon. So.
And last question I have, each army unit needs to have medical care, right? So doctors, nurses, physicians, and all these things. Where does Taliban force or forces, where do they get these trained medical staff and doctors?
There were, the Taliban had medical facilities that they would use, sort of like village doctors and, stuff like that. They did use international aid organizations, some of the charities that set up hospitals and stuff. They would send people to those. So sometimes fighters would be brought to that. Otherwise, you can always send them back to Pakistan.
Yeah.
It's like the catch-all. Pakistan's the catch-all. Like at the root of every issue that we have going on here. So that's the thing with that. They always, in so many engagements that we had with them, and U.S. forces had, if they could do it, they would always attempt and try to be successful in carrying away their dead and wounded. The times when Taliban dead were captured, so to speak, were found from a firefight. The times when that happened were circumstances where maybe a whole Taliban unit was smoked, or they couldn't get to that guy for whatever reason. But there's so many times when firefights would happen, and maybe you'd run over there and like you might see like blood all over this one room or something, but there's no body. So they were very, very disciplined in taking care of their people in terms of bringing out bodies and wounded for that.
Was it because of psychological warfare like Mongol army did in the past, or what was the reason to carry the dead bodies?
I think, well, it's it's sort of shaheed. It's shaheed worship, right? Where you have you got to have a body. You got to have a body to be the shaheed. Like you're gonna put flowers around him and have a funeral and all this stuff, and it's like that's how you honor your dead. And if you don't, you can't have a funeral without a body. More so, I don't know, more so than others, I guess. I don't know. The Kurds are the same thing, the same way. The Kurds would risk, fighters would have people die trying to get guys already dead.
Yes.
So it's just different cultural values at that point, I guess.
Thank you very much, Miles. As usual, it was really, really informative, excellent. And would you like to share something with us at the end? Viewers of these channels or everyone is watching this.
I don't know. Right now, it's a very horrible and sad time in a lot of Afghan lives and a lot of American lives as well. It's a very hard time to deal with for a lot of us. But the way I'm dealing with it is helping as many Afghans as I can get out, and I'm trying to do that by working I missed I missed our call time earlier because I've been sitting here all day looking at visa requirements and texting people in Kabul and in Herat about ways to, get smuggled out, or visa stuff, or, what are the visa requirements, and writing recommendation letters. So I've been doing that all day. And I missed our time because I had to stop and go eat, and I forgot that we were talking. So I don't know. I think and the biggest difference, I don't know. I see a lot of U.S. vets and U.S. forces saying, like, kind of just like scowling, and they're mad and they're angry over what has happened, and they're trying to make sense of it, and they're trying to find some justification for what's going on, or we'll get back at them, or some crazy stuff or whatever. And I'm kind of annoyed because I wish for every Facebook post or every social media post I see with some veteran celebrity or guys who are in, I wish for every post that they made, I wish instead of writing an angry post that just gets other people angry, I wish they could just have taken that time and written a letter to their congressman and asked, to lessen up these stupid visa restrictions, right? On a lot of the Afghan families and interpreters that are trying to come over. And so, for example, like with the SIV, the special immigrant visa, because it's like, you can be mad about losing the war, but don't be mad. Like, what you should be doing is, taking care of the people that we left behind, the people that sacrificed so much for us. And that, that's the difference we need to be making now, not just having a pissing mood on Facebook and saying, like, we did our part. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, do your part again and help get people out. So that, I don't know, that's kind of how I feel about it, from that perspective there.
Thank you very much, Miles, for saying this. And again, thanks for taking your time, your valuable experience, and also and sharing it with all of us here. And I wish you a nice day and hope to talk to you soon, Miles.
All right, you too as well, sir. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.